Hello and welcome to you all. I'd like to start by thanking ECAT for filming this for us and Ernie for being our cameraman. Thank you, Ernie. Months ago, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church started an initiative to assess the needs and problems in our community. So there were numbers of us that were on a community assessment committee, and we went out and we did numbers of interviews. One of the people that I was fortunate enough to interview is Larissa Swenson. I found her very impressive. I liked hearing about the organization Wings of Hope. And when we did our community assessment, substance abuse and domestic violence were two of the things that key people in the community routinely said were major problems, really major issues and major needs in the community. So when I talked to Larissa, I asked her if she would be willing to come and speak to our senior club about Wings of Hope. And I also asked her if she would just do a piece on what seniors could do to help, just so that it would really just kind of tie in what we were doing here. So Larissa said she would be willing to give a background on Wings of Hope, but I'd like to just give you a short bio on Larissa before we get started. Larissa Swenson was hired as Wings of Hope's Substance Abuse Prevention Program Manager in December of 2017. She received her MPA from Bridgewater State University in 2013 and her bachelor's degree in English with a minor in biology from Rhode Island College in 2011. Having previously worked in tobacco prevention in the greater Boston area, Larissa is excited to return to Easton and its surrounding communities, where she completed her graduate school internship with the Greater Brockton Health Alliance. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Judy.
Larissa, and I'll just turn the program over.
Great. Thank you. How is everyone today? Good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Big thanks to Judy, to Dick Carlson, to Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and to your lovely group here today to present on Wings of Hope, give a little bit of background about the coalition, and to talk about prevention, what that entails, and to also talk about what you could do in order to address substance use prevention as well. So to get started, a little bit of background on Easton Wings of Hope. So Easton Wings of Hope was founded in January 2015 by Easton resident Kristen Harrison. Kristen had experienced her own tragedy in her family. She had lost a niece to an overdose that year, or in that same month. Her niece had started the path to, she had a heroin overdose. So she started the path to heroin because she had tried using alcohol, marijuana, and other substances when she was young as a teen. So that did eventually lead the path to harder substances, and unfortunately she did pass away at that time. Wings of Hope, even though it started, it kind of started growing in January 2015. The first official coalition meeting was in April 2015. At that first official coalition meeting, there were 25 concerned community members that attended that first meeting. Ever since then, Kristen worked tirelessly to engage other sectors of the community, so the religious institutions, the Easton Police Department, the Easton Fire Department, and really also Easton Public Schools in order to get them on board with her effort. As time has gone on, 3.5 years later, not only is the coalition recognized as the official youth substance use prevention coalition for the town of Easton, the Wings of Hope Coalition is also extremely lucky to come into many different streams of funding. So Wings of Hope, to fund my position, it's under a federal drug-free communities grant, which is for 5 years, $125,000 a year. So hopefully we'll have that first 5 years of funding and hopefully be able to apply for an additional 5 years. So the coalition does have the possibility of being federally funded for about 10 years, which is great. The coalition's also really lucky to receive a grant from a local coalition. It's called the Greater Brockton Health Alliance. They received that a couple of years ago before receiving the federal drug-free communities grant. And the town of Easton is also very generous because this coalition has also been able to grow through donations from its townspeople. So Easton Wings of Hope does have a vision, it does have a mission. We'll talk about the vision first. So Easton Wings of Hope, it is a community coalition that envisions a healthy Easton where healthy choices are recognized, valued, and accessible to all. So we want to make sure that Easton, not only Easton youth, but everybody in Easton has that right to make healthy choices. The mission of Easton Wings of Hope is to prevent youth substance use through education, awareness, and policy change. And when we're thinking about youth, I mean, we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic here in the state of Massachusetts. It is very devastating. But why does Wings of Hope specifically concentrate on youth, and why do we concentrate on preventing them from ever using substances? I'll get to that in a minute. But to kind of sashay into that a little bit, how many of you have seen our lovely billboard on Belmont Street over by Honeydew Donuts? You all have seen, a lot of you have seen it, awesome. That's what we hope, that a lot of Easton and people who drive by do see it. It's right on that Easton-Brockton line. So basically it talks about the reason why Easton youth do not use alcohol, and that's because their parents. They're talking, the kids are listening. We did get these results from, or we did get this statistic from our 2018 Youth Health Survey that we ended up doing at Oliver Ames High School in February. But the reason why we do prevention, the reason why we collect this data, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. We call it the river parable, and it talks about why prevention is really, really important when it comes to addressing substance use in the community. So I want you to think about for a minute, think about a really fast-moving river, okay? A really fast-moving river. And think about a town. We can think about, if you look at the town in this area. So the town is facing an issue where you have youth who are just jumping into the river. They're jumping into the river, they're getting hurt, they're flowing downstream, and they're either severely injured or unfortunately they've passed away. So there's a couple of different things we can do in order to address that issue. One thing is, if you take a look at the ambulance in the middle of the slide, we could put an ambulance downstream and catch everybody as they come downstream. But at that point, we can consider that treatment for youth substance use disorder. So we're getting them, but it's already happening. A lot of that youth substance use is already happening. So we're kind of right at that point. We could also, I forgot to put a picture of a life preserver on the slide, but what we could also do, one of the other things we could do is we can intervene, we can get in the middle, and we can always throw out a bunch of life preservers into the river in order to save these youth who have jumped into the river. But we're already kind of in the middle of it. They're already using, how else can we help them after that? Another thing is, what we can do is, think about it for a minute. I'm going to actually push it out to you guys. When we're thinking about prevention, how can we prevent these youth? How can we prevent any youth from jumping into that river in the first place? What are some ways we can think about preventing youth from jumping into that river in the first place? Anyone? Education. All right.
Stop the river.
Stop the river. We could, absolutely. Activities for youth. And just even thinking more simply on that terms, thinking about the river, we could set up a sign to say stay away. We could set up a fence to keep youth away from jumping in the river. One of the things we can always do is, maybe, for every town is different, we can always think about sending different extra police patrols over by the upstream of that river. But when we're thinking about youth substance use prevention especially, we're always thinking upstream. So we want to get them before they start using substances. So stopping the river, putting a sign up, education, providing activities for youth, that's all really great, and those are really awesome ideas, because the biggest thing that we want to do is we don't want them to start using in the first place. If youth start using in the first place, what happens, and a really great example I'll give right now, is vaping. How many of you have heard of vaping? E-cigarette use, smoking in general? Yep. Well, cigarette use is down statewide, about 6.6%. Vaping has increased quite a bit. The reason why vaping is increasing is because the tobacco industry has decided to make a lot of these e-cigarette products relatively inexpensive. They're all flavored. There's about 8,000 different flavors available when it comes to e-cigarette products. And sometimes, I mean, Easton's really great. Easton did pass policy back in 2016, raising the minimum legal sales age to 21 for tobacco products, and 2, taking all flavored products out of the convenience stores in town. So they did a really great job of that. But sometimes some of those e-cigarette and vaping products are still pretty easy to get. Easton youth, or any youth for that matter, does become addicted to nicotine at an early age. It changes the chemicals of the brain, and it primes them for other addictive behaviors later on in life. So they could decide, oh, I've tried this already, this nicotine is great, these e-cigarettes are great. They might want to try to explore other things. Teens are naturally sensation-seeking anyway, so they're going to want to try a few different things. That impulse part of the brain is not totally developed. I could remember going back 15 years ago and thinking of some things I did when I was 15, and I didn't do anything bad, but I was very fiery when I was 15, so there was a couple of things I probably shouldn't have said or done, but that impulse part of the brain wasn't really formed, and like I said, I was a very fiery teenager when I was much younger. So the thing is, with Easton Wings of Hope, the reason why we're doing this is not only do we want to prevent them from falling in the river, we want to know why they're falling in the river, we want to know why they're using substances. And the way we do that is we do the educational programs, we do the activities with the kids, we also collect a lot of different forms of data. So like I said before, we did a youth health survey at the high school back in February 2018. We also did a youth health survey at the middle school in December 2017. So as soon as I came on, they did the survey at the middle school. And then we also just wrapped up a parent survey, which was great because it kind of gave us a little bit of an inside look as to the thoughts of Easton parents and what their thoughts were on alcohol use and marijuana use. And the two big substances that Easton Wings of Hope is concentrating on right now, we're looking at alcohol use and marijuana use by youth. Eventually, I think vaping will make its way into the forefront because it's just such a huge problem at this point. But we do collect the data, we do the research to not only, like I said, find out how we can prevent the youth from jumping in the river, but why they're jumping in that river. And by doing all this stuff that Easton Wings of Hope does, we're pretty much acting as the teen's prefrontal cortex. So like I said before, remember that impulse part of the brain is not really developed when you're a teen? So that's what the prefrontal cortex is all about. I know it's a really weird picture and there's lots of tiny writing, but as the teenage brain develops, all those wonderful little synapses start to form, myelination happens, so all those lovely neurons, they're encoded and they're nice and warm, and that impulse part of the brain starts to develop. So they're not teens over time, they do not become as sensation seeking. So they don't want to try anything like drugs and alcohol. And also what happens is the brain does not fully develop until you're age 25. So as science has gone along over the years, we've determined that that brain does not fully develop until age 25. So we tried to tell parents the biggest thing that you can do is to talk to your kids about delaying the use of substances for as long as possible. And that's also why they talk about preventing youth substance use when you're in college too. They don't want to start getting them into substance use in college because even though they're in college and they think they're technically adults as of age 18, their brain is not fully developed. So a lot of the schools, they end up protecting them that way too. But we want to access the teen's prefrontal cortex. We want to help them decide to delay onset of use as late as possible. We want teens to make healthy choices, and teens are risk-taking, like I said before, but we want them to make healthy risks or take healthy risks. We want them to learn how to play a musical instrument. We want them to develop their art skills. We don't want them to end up using alcohol. We don't want them to smoke marijuana because it's just gonna, down the line, it can decrease memory, it can decrease IQ. So we don't want it to affect them in the long run and predispose them to other addictive behaviors as they get older. Does anybody have any questions so far? Or I can take questions at the end. So what can you guys do when it comes to youth substance use? There's a bunch of different things. I did a bunch of research in order to prepare myself for today. So one of the things is serve as an influencer in your teens, or if you have a teen that you mentor, or if you have a grandchild, serve as an influencer in his or her life. I mean, I remember it was much easier to talk to my grandparents than it was to talk to my parents. Also, it's really easy if you're if you're the grandparent or the mentor and your teen is in the passenger seat of the car and you're in the driver's seat, you guys are not face to face. So teens find it much easier to talk to an adult then. So be an influencer, talk to them about what's going on in school, and they might get a little bit more comfortable with you even so, and they'll come to you if they're running into a problem with substance use. And you can even ask them like, what's going on in school? They'll find it more easy to talk to you than probably their parent. Share your hobbies, and then they'll share some of theirs as well. So for example, if you like to garden, share that with them. Obviously gardening is not really an option now with the cold weather coming in. I woke up this morning, it was very cold. So share if you have a hobby for gardening, if you have a hobby for painting, if you have a hobby for knitting, share that with your grandchild or your teen mentor. And they'll probably show you some stuff as well. You might have questions about your computer or your smartphone or anything like that, and they might be able to show you a couple of things that you never really thought that you could do, or something that was really nifty. I know all of my grandparents unfortunately have passed on, but I can tell you even when I show my parents something new on their smartphone, they get really excited about it. So share your hobbies, they'll share theirs, and then that even deepens the relationship there. Provide encouragement. It comes in many forms. So methods of or forms of encouragement can mean, say your high schooler gets a really great report card. So you could take them out for ice cream, or you could text them and say, great job on your report card. You could give them a call and say, great job on your report card. I know my Nana used to congratulate me when I did really well in school. So that was a little bit of encouragement to keep going anyway. So give them that encouragement. It doesn't even have to pertain to school. It can pertain to athletics as well, or even competitions. So if you have a student athlete and they do really well in football, basketball, gymnastics. I know Easton really prides itself on its athletics. So congratulate them in their achievement, whether it's academic, athletic, or even in the arts, because that means that it shows that you're paying attention and it makes them want to keep going. One of the big things that I cannot say enough about prevention as a whole is lock up your medications. So Easton, usually Easton Wings of Hope and the Easton Police Department, they usually partner twice a year to do a drug take-back day. One in April, the end of April, and one at the end of October. Unfortunately, we did not do the one at the end of October this year because of the really horrible weather that came through the weekend before Halloween. But what's really, really, really important is to lock up those medications, because that's kind of how it does start too, is teens who are curious, they're sensation seeking, they do start going through your medicine cabinet, they see what's available. So one of the big things, a couple of things is, like I said, lock up those meds, take stock of your meds. If you know you have a certain count in your medication, one of the bottles of your medications, take stock of how many pills you have. Dispose of medications properly, I can't say that enough. I've yelled at my mother a couple of times because she's told me she's flushed medications down the toilet. So I get pretty upset with her when she does that. There is a drug disposal box at the Easton Police Department. They do accept all forms of liquid and pills. They do not accept sharps. So just keep that in mind. Usually in the spring, Easton does have a household hazardous waste day where you can dispose of sharps. And then when we do the drug take-back day in October, we accept medications and sharps at that one. But always lock up your meds, take stock of what meds you have, how much of each medication you have, and make sure just to dispose of them properly. Not just for your teens or your grandchildren, for the environment as well.
Larissa?
Yes.
Another point, that box is in the police department. You just go in, you put it in there. Nobody has to go.
No, sir.
Questions asked, you're not interviewed. You just
Correct.
put everything in this box.
No questions asked.
You just need to do it.
Pop it in there, and then, oh, you have a question.
And no, I was just going to say, look at the expiration dates.
Yes.
Expired, get rid of it.
If they're expired, you're not using it, toss it, bring it to the police station.
Don't old people keep their drugs though because they might want to share them with somebody else or use them themselves? My mother-in-law does not throw drugs away.
I don't recommend that, because you don't know how it's going to affect the other individual, number one. Number two, if it's expired, you really don't know what the effects are on the expired medication. So the best thing to do is to always dispose of them if they're unused or if they're expired.
Should be encouraging people to throw away.
Absolutely, absolutely. I get really weirded out if I find an old tube of bacitracin or antibiotic ointment in my drawer and I throw that out, because I just get really weirded out about that. Even just cough medicine that you buy over the counter at CVS or Walgreens, if that's expired, make sure you dispose of that properly as well. And it is no questions asked, and it is, they do, once that box gets nice and full, the Easton Police Department does end up bringing it down to be incinerated, so.
And you can just dump it all in a plastic bag and just.
You got it. During the first drug take back day I did at the end of April, people were bringing bags of stuff, just bags of stuff. And it was really great to see them disposing of those medications that were no longer being used or were expired. And the biggest thing, before I forget the last one, is continue to learn about youth substance use disorder and youth substance use prevention. The more you understand about it, the better off you are to talk to your teen, if you mentor a teen, like I said, or your grandchild or a friend's grandchild, because the more you educate yourself, the better off you are. Like I said, we are in the middle of an opioid epidemic in the Commonwealth. The whole nation is in the middle of an opioid epidemic. But the big thing is we have to make sure that youth do not start using, period. The longer they put off that first use of substances, the better off they are. We do not want to rewire their brains. We don't want them getting addicted to any substances early on, because it could mean heavier addiction later on in life. And if you're looking for any information, there is tons of information in the back that I left about vaping, about, talking to your teen about the substance use. A lot of that is for parents, but you guys can definitely take a look at that as well. It definitely applies to everybody involved in this venture and in these efforts. Because the more you educate yourself, the better off you are. You can talk more freely about it. You can talk to a teen. You can talk to a grandchild about it. One of the other things that we, as Easton Wings of Hope is a community coalition, and being federally funded, we concentrate on two things being federally funded. One, we concentrate on preventing youth substance use. And two, we're concentrating on increasing community collaboration. So that means giving it back to you guys, giving it back to the town of Easton, and even to the surrounding areas, because the more this information and this education is diffused, the better off this greater Brockton area is. So getting involved, increasing community collaboration, by giving it back to you guys, also, it's going to help Wings of Hope sustain all of its efforts even far after federal funding is gone. So we want to be able to spread it out to the community in every way, shape, or form. We want to be able to sustain Wings of Hope's work after federal and otherwise other funding is done. But to get involved, Easton Wings of Hope does have volunteer committees. So the first volunteer committee we have is called the Policy Volunteer Committee. Now, as a federally funded coalition, Easton Wings of Hope cannot advocate, we can't take really any stance on any local policy. But we can give it back to you guys, we can educate you, we can provide you with the information in order to help community-wide change happen policy-wise. Youth involvement. So one of the other big things that Wings of Hope is getting involved with is making sure that youth start volunteering for the coalition. It's really important that youth start volunteering for the coalition because they can serve as peer mentors. One of the big things that we're looking at right now is making sure that we dissipate that sense of peer pressure in the community, because not every teen is really using substances. But because of that peer pressure amongst teens at the high school and even at the middle school level, lots of them are believing that their friends are doing these substances, so it could pressure them into also starting to use. So we're all about getting teens involved, serving as peer mentors, and dissipating that cloud of peer pressure, because not everybody's doing it. Easton Wings of Hope does have a lot of events. I'm sure, how many of you have seen in the newspaper all the things that Easton Wings of Hope has participated in? Not many? All right, you have as well?
runs, walk.
Yep, so we do a lot of different things in the community. This weekend, we're actually gonna be at the Parkview Family Fun Day. We usually are at the Old Colony Y every first Saturday of the month with Hidden in Plain Sight. That's going to change up a little bit. Hidden in Plain Sight is actually a mock teenage bedroom that parents, grandparents, and adults can come tour. They can take a look at the possible signs of risky youth behavior. That does include youth substance use. So they can come tour the bedroom as long as they like or as little as they like. The next time that's going to be happening is at the Y is December 1st. It's at the Easton Y from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then tomorrow night, we're actually going to be at Oliver Ames High School for parent-teacher conferences. So it'll be a really great way to target a lot of different parents and a lot of different populations. It is for adults only, but we do encourage you guys to come take a look at it on December 1st, and then we're going to take a little bit of break for the winter and reassess where we're going to be doing Hidden in Plain Sight as well. I was really excited to learn from Pastor Polk that Holy Trinity Lutheran Church is going to house the Easton Farmers Market downstairs. I'm very excited about that because that'll be another great outlet for Wings of Hope to come to come talk to the community. But we've done Hidden in Plain Sight. We're going to be at Parkview Fun Day. We've done Drug Take Back Days. Easton Wings of Hope is participating in the Festival of Trees this coming year as well. So I just finished creating probably about 50 different ornaments for the tree. So we're really, really excited to get going. And the theme for the tree is shining above the influence. So we're going to have teens write on pieces of Christmas paper why they choose to not use substances, drop it into a little mason jar, and then over time during the Festival of Trees, what we'll do is we'll post it on social media, we'll post it around the community just to let everybody know why Easton youth choose not to use substances. And we call it shining above the influence because the tree has a lot of glitter. So it'll be really exciting to see how it turns out. But if you want to get involved in any events, whether it's the promotion, the setup, the breakdown, let me know. We'll be more than happy to have you help. We also have a communications and outreach committee. So Wings of Hope has a lot of specific messaging. As you saw earlier, we do have a vision, we do have a mission. And when we're talking about youth substance use prevention, there's a lot of different language that we do end up using. And definitely outreach being whether it's through the town crier, whether it's through the Easton Journal, whether it's through any church bulletins, anything like that, we would love to have as much outreach and as much messaging get out there into the community as possible. And then our last volunteer committee is Healthy Environments. This volunteer committee actually partners with another coalition in town. It's called Healthy Easton. Healthy Easton is responsible for a lot of healthy eating activity initiatives in town. How many of you have walked through the town of Easton and have seen the little sticker on the restaurants in Easton that says Healthy Easton? Or even if you go to the Easton Y, it has a little sticker that says Healthy Easton. It was approved by the coalition. If you haven't, doctor has. If you haven't, that's okay. But Healthy Easton is all about healthy initiatives in town. So like I said, healthy eating, getting moving. The coalition does put their sticker on establishments like the Old Colony Y, any other restaurant that offers healthy options as far as eating is concerned. So it's all about getting out, getting moving, and finding those healthy alternatives. So we partner with Healthy Easton because one of the big things that we're seeing in town too is there might be some areas in town that might need some cleaning up or might need some extra lighting or might just need something built in that little area to kind of ward off any youth that might go towards that area, which can increase possible use of substances. So we're trying to find these areas that might need to be improved over time, so there's not that risk that teens might congregate there and possibly partake in substance use. And there's my contact information. My title, it's kind of long, I apologize. My phone number, my email address. We are at eastonwingsofhope.org. We are starting to renovate the website. That's going to come in the next couple of months. But we're also on social media. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you Facebook when I went into college in 2006. But yeah, if you Facebook, join us on social media. I'll post about this presentation probably today. And does anybody have any questions? I knew I threw a lot of information at you.
Where do kids get opioids? Because opioids are, I had both knees replaced and they ordered opioids for me.
Right.
So they were in a little jar and they sit on my bedside table or something like that. But where do kids how do they get hold of opioids and things like that?
So that's one of the biggest lessons is when I talked earlier about locking up your medications. Not that I'm saying that you wouldn't lock up your medication.
No, I don't.
There's no.
Lock 'em up.
Right. So, I mean, that's why it's really important if you don't really have a place to lock up meds, just to make sure you take, if you have a grandchild that comes in and out or a teen that comes in and out of your home, make sure you do lock up those medications if you're able to. Make sure to take stock of how much of each medication you have. Another way that teens can get a hold of it, and remember, it just doesn't start with heroin. They've also started to use, in the beginning, they've probably used alcohol and they've probably used marijuana to start. So it has progressed to using opioids or, unfortunately, heroin. Sometimes they are purchased on the streets, I should say. They do get it from friends. Friends might also get it from other houses that their medications are not locked up. So definitely that is how they start. So what happens is they use the alcohol, they use the marijuana, and then as time's progressed, their brain is fully into addictive behaviors, and they're getting them from those different avenues. So
Illegal sources of opioids that they get them from, or
illegal sources?
like if I went to high school, is there someone going to sell me opioids from a?
That I can't give you a definite answer for. Anytime it's not your medication that's not prescribed to you, you shouldn't be using, the teen shouldn't be using it anyway. But I could not speak to, I will tell you data-wise that opioid use and heroin use is incredibly, incredibly low. From between our middle school and our high school surveys, the highest use that we see and why we concentrate on alcohol and marijuana is we find the highest numbers in alcohol, marijuana, and then eventually we'll be adding vaping to that mix too. But the use of heroin and the use of opioids is very, very low amongst Easton youth. So.
I hear that.
Oh, I'm just getting this lovely lady in the back.
Okay, I can go first. So, if you know someone who's a heroin user,
Okay.
and they've been to several rehabilitative programs,
Mhm.
it has not worked, what happens next?
That's a tough question. I mean, we have to remember that the use of substances is a disorder. It's a neurological disorder. So there are many times where, like for example, I mean, heroin, when you're think about this, nicotine when compared to heroin is actually just as addictive. So when you're taking a look at nicotine addiction, when using smoking cigarettes or anything similar of the sort, it's very hard for individuals to stop smoking, and sometimes they do relapse. Individuals who do suffer from substance use disorder, it can happen often where they do go get help and they do come back and they do relapse repeatedly. As far as anything, the one thing I would recommend, because I can't really recommend any particular place to go to, is I would recommend trying, again, to educate yourself as much as possible, try to provide them with resources as much as possible. They might be willing to listen. If they are, that's great. If they're not really at that stage yet to try recovery again, so. Yes?
I read about fentanyl all the
Yes.
time. And is that a heroin-based product, or is that?
The thing about fentanyl is that fentanyl is used in many different surgeries to put people under. It does have devastating effects. In relating to heroin, what happens is sometimes when heroin is sold, it has to be cut into many different packages or little packets. And what happens is dealers, unfortunately, they are cutting heroin with fentanyl. So in order to make their source spread out a little bit more easily. So what happens is fentanyl, it can be very devastating. It has devastating effects. I'm sure you've heard news stories where police officers have gone to the scene of an overdose and they've basically touched the carpet on the inside of the car of the individual who's overdosed, and they've passed out themselves, and they've had to use Narcan on the police officers to bring them out of that overdose state. So when when the heroin is cut with the fentanyl, it does make it more potent. It does make it much, much more dangerous. Yes. So that's how it's related.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh my goodness, many. We'll start in the front and then move down.
What's your thought on the legalization of marijuana?
As a federally funded coalition, I really cannot speak. I cannot, unfortunately. No, unfortunately, I can't. Wings of Hope can provide education as to why we're really concerned about youth using marijuana at an early age. But again, as a federally funded coalition and representing the coalition, I cannot really give a hard opinion on that.
So you can give literature out?
We provide the education, yep. So we provide the education to the Easton community so they can make an informed decision on their own, absolutely. Yep, and that's why we bring that information. We do provide education on our social media. But yes, I can't give a hard and fast
Kind of a crazy rule, though.
opinion. It can be, but because we're federally funded, it throws that little piece in the mix for us. So we do have to be very careful with giving hard and fast opinions. So.
One of the people that I interviewed as part of the Sustainability and Growth Task Force was the Deputy Chief of Police, Deputy Chief Boone. And he told me that the two highest things in Easton, you would think were robbery and murder. Well, it's not robbery and murder, it's opioid addiction and domestic abuse. As far as opioid addiction goes, the police will take an opioid addicted person and seek medical care for them, but when they're ready to be released back, basically it's Kristen Harrison, who is the Easton's volunteer. I don't think she gets paid, or I don't know what she does, but she's the person that they would then come back to and hopefully interact with and share. So, we've been looking at what can Holy Trinity do.
Right.
We're not going to solve the opioid addiction problem by ourselves, but we could maybe provide space for Kristen Harrison to meet with a person that's not the town hall, where someone walks into town hall and they say, well, here comes so-and-so, here comes Ed Jepson, he must have an opioid problem or something like that. So there's a lot to this, more than, Larissa's talking about Wings of Hope and stuff like that, but the police department is working with this, and Kristen Harrison is beyond Wings of Hope, or maybe
It is, yeah, so Kristen's outreach efforts, Kristen Harrison is the founder of Easton Wings of Hope, but Kristen Harrison, she's also a nurse. Her outreach efforts are separate from her. So like Dick was saying, if somebody does overdose in town, the police seek medical treatment for them. Kristen would be the one to later on provide information and possibly seek out a bed for them. She's done it for quite a number of years. She does it on a volunteer basis only, and she's really great at it. But yes, Kristen does offer those outreach, that separate outreach piece to the town as a nurse. Yes, Doc, we're going to make it around.
Obviously the medical profession is very concerned about what's happening here. And we were at fault, unfortunately, back in the 90s, because we were advised that they weren't treating pain adequately. So that was the 90s, and I read somewhere that about 80% of people who become addicted started off with a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all being looked at very critically.
Correct.
It's harder now, I think, more for physicians to write for these kind of medications. Like somebody's having surgery, who's got a major problem, they obviously have pain.
Right.
And you have to treat that.
Right.
But now there's partial fills.
Mm-hmm.
You get a prescription for 20, you can fill it for 10, and if you feel you need more, you go back and get the rest of it.
Right.
So, and they're very, very judicious in the way that these drugs are now being prescribed.
I know CVS, not just the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, even companies like CVS, they're even placing limitations on how many days of an opioid medication can be filled. That's what they did, is they took a look back in the 90s and back in the early 2000s, and they said, we have a problem. So they have been judiciously looking at that and seeing how they can improve that.
Also, specialties in addictive medicine is
Right.
becoming more prevalent, obviously, because there's a big need for it.
Absolutely.
Efforts to have more substance abuse beds available.
Mm-hmm.
So people get into trouble, and then the follow-up is important, obviously, afterwards, too. So
Right. It's very,
a lot that's trying to be done about it.
a lot.
Governor's involved in it, too.
He is. Between grassroots coalitions like Wings of Hope, between changing laws statewide, changing laws nationwide, there is a lot being done in order to address this epidemic. A lot is being done. Who had questions? Yes.
I have heard of vaping.
Yes.
Certainly, but I just recently became aware of something called juuling.
Okay.
And I didn't know whether other people might not have heard of it either, and that maybe you could just explain that.
Yeah. So like you said before, Judy, before I became the coordinator for Wings of Hope, I did tobacco prevention for Greater Boston. So, and juuling, the concept of juuling was just starting to explode when I left my position last year. So juuling, vaping, e-cigarette use, it's all pretty much the same. So what happens is with juuling, and I wish I brought my Juul with me because I do have it, it's in our hidden in plain sight display for parents to come tour through. So if you want to check out hidden in plain sight and try to find the Juul in the display, I pose that challenge to everybody once they enter. So what happens with juuling is basically, how many of you have seen what a thumb drive looks like or a USB drive that looks like that can plug into a computer? Okay, so Juul is not much bigger than a flash drive. It's about this big, it's about this skinny. And it actually can be charged on a computer through a USB port. So what happens is the device itself is about $50. It can be bought at any vaping store, it can be bought at any adult tobacco store in the area. And they sell what they call little pods. They're called Juul pods. The most alarming thing is the Juul, the device itself is kind of expensive, $50 to $60, but the pods themselves, they come in a 4-pack, and they come in the blister packs like you see, like gum comes in, and 4 of them is only about $20 to $25. The problem with Juul pods is, one, they're flavored. So they have flavors like creme brulee, cucumber, fruit medley, so those flavors are enticing to youth, even though Juul has said that they're not making it enticing. And one of those teeny tiny little pods, let me see if I actually, you know what, let me see if I have a picture of, I should, oh my goodness. Let's see. I do. Let me see if I can find it. Right here. All right, so if you take a look here, it's kind of tiny, but I will show you. So what you see there in the very middle, that's a refillable e-cigarette. So what you can do is you fill that with what they call e-liquid. And again, that comes in many different flavors. And again, that's why it's enticing to youth, and the tobacco companies are using that flavoring to mask the taste of the chemicals and the taste of the tobacco. So that in the middle, that you see that blue device, that's a refillable e-cigarette. On the right-hand side in the gray, that's a Juul. So the pod that's at the very top, that little black piece, like I said, it comes in different flavors like cucumber, fruit medley, creme brulee. And a lot of people say, well, how fast does somebody go through a Juul pod? And honestly, it really depends on the person. E-cigarettes in general provide many more puffs than a conventional cigarette, so they're getting exposed to the flavoring, the nicotine, and any other chemical that might be in those devices. But if you see, that's a Juul on the right, and then on the left-hand side is a Juul variant. So I don't think it's an actual Juul itself, but it's very similar to the Juul. And the danger, again, like we said, we don't want youth to get addicted to any substance early on. We want them to delay that use of substances until they're 25, until that impulse part of the brain is fully functional, and they can make that decision that they choose not to smoke, or they choose not to use marijuana, or they choose not to drink alcohol at an early age. But exposure to nicotine can rewire that brain. So that is what a Juul looks like, and that's the biggest concern. It is easily concealable, as you may be able to tell. They can hide it. A lot of people can hide it in their sleeves, in their hoodies. So yeah, that's the one thing why juuling is exploding. It is so dangerous. Any? Yes.
Just thinking about these devices.
Right.
We've had the newspaper and the media and so forth have come out relative to smoking and cancer, lung cancer.
Right.
Is there anything relative to this?
The Surgeon General? Yeah, so like the Surgeon General released in the 1960s that cigarette smoking is causing cancer, and they had discovered that in the 60s, and To this day, it's just growing, and it's definitely believable today. The Surgeon General, I believe it was 2016, released a similar report on e-cigarettes, and they said that pregnant women, teens, really nobody should use these devices. A lot of what is found, the chemicals that are found in e-cigarettes and devices like the Juul, is reminiscent of car exhaust. So think about when you're inhaling car exhaust and the emissions outside. Somebody is actually sucking that directly into their lungs. And we don't want that to happen. Yes, Doc?
I think that's been one of the problems. People feel that this is not as serious as smoking cigarettes and tobacco, and aren't against it as much as they feel strongly about it as people do about tobacco products. But these products are just as bad.
They are.
It's in these things are very to the lungs, especially a younger person. And they haven't been around that long. So
No.
there's been a lot of long-range studies, but there's going to be some problems with the whole thing.
And that's the thing, since the early 2000s, I think they just started to come out, the early 2000s, and they don't know the first-hand or second-hand implications yet. The Surgeon General does say it's not good either way. But another thing that a lot of these e-cigarettes contain is they contain propylene glycol, which is similar to vegetable oil. So think about it, not only are you sucking in the nicotine, you're sucking in that flavoring, and you're sucking in all those other chemicals, but you're also sucking something into your lungs that's like vegetable oil. Vegetable oil is really not meant to be in your lungs, so that's and the FDA is starting to slowly regulate devices such as these, which is good. Yes, ma'am?
Is there any second-hand repercussions
From this? They're just starting to try to figure that out. I certainly wouldn't want to be around a person who's juuling. A lot of places in the state of Massachusetts and other places around the nation have banned e-cigarette use from happening indoors. Usually when there's a no smoking provision or a no smoking law in an establishment, usually most of the time it's starting to pertain to e-cigarettes. I know for example, next door in Stoughton, they just, a couple years ago or a year and a half ago, they just banned smoking in public parks. And from what I understand too, the town of Easton just changed some of their language in their code to prevent smoking in public places as well. Because we really don't know that secondhand implication yet. The science is starting to come out slowly but surely to show that secondhand exposure is no good, just like if somebody were exposed to secondhand cigarette smoke. But yeah, like I said, I would not want to be around somebody who is using it. The sad thing is, like I said, the tobacco industry and the makers of these devices, they're using flavorings that are really, they smell great. Watermelon, cherry, cotton candy, pineapple. I told somebody the other day, I said I was behind a car driving to work and I got a quick whiff. And usually you can tell if somebody in front of you is smoking a cigarette and you're kind of just like, oh God. But when they're using an e-cigarette or a Juul or another vaping device, I kind of was like just inhaling and I said, what's that great smell? It's really fruity. And then I realized the individual in front of me was vaping. So I was kind of bummed because it did smell really nice. And then I realized what it was, and then my substance use prevention hat came on and I got really disappointed. But yeah, so I wouldn't recommend anybody being exposed to this secondhand, no. Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a different perspective.
Sure?
Not because what you're saying is wrong, it's sometimes what you're saying doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feeling of invincibility among the teenagers. So when you
Right.
tell them what not to do, they're walrus. But if you tell them what they can do, their mind is open.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than tell children what they shouldn't do, we should try to tell them what they should do.
Right.
What they can do.
And
there's very positive things. For example, I was incarcerated at 14.
okay.
My father came to see me. My father had a face on him I didn't recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And I said in my 14-year-old mind, I said, what's his problem? I'm the one behind bars.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I didn't realize the effects that I had on my father. So when you tell a child they shouldn't drink or a drug because they can go to jail, sometimes that's effective and sometimes it's not effective.
Right.
Because of their incivility. They not only will show you times that what you're saying didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can say, well, you could have a heart attack, and then they'll say, well, I know a person that's 94 years old and they still do it, see? So if they're gonna do something, you can offer them something that they can do.
Absolutely.
Some of the things you can offer is like your younger brother. You love your younger brother, you know you're a power of example of him and his family.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't use this stuff, you know, your brother will benefit from it.
Right.
When you take the focus off the person, they'll listen.
Right.
When you keep pointing the finger and say, if you do this, if you do that,
Mhm.
if you do this, and their wall goes up, and they don't
Right.
hear anything you say. Now, I'm not saying that's true in all cases.
Right.
I'm trying to say that there's another perspective.
Oh, absolutely, and I definitely agree with you, because chances are if you're telling teens, so that's where our data comes into play, sir. So when we're taking a look at data, as far as Oliver Ames High School or Easton Middle School, for example, say for example that we take a look at it and we see that, for example, this is not hard numbers, for example, 70% of Easton youth are not choosing to use alcohol at an early age. Easton Wings of Hope is probably coming along in the spring. They're going to be doing something called positive community norms. And what that is it's basically turning the statistics on its head. So instead of saying, Easton, did you know that 30% of your youth are underage drinking? We're going to say, Easton, did you know that 70% of your youth are choosing to not use alcohol at an early age? So it's not really putting it's not really putting the focus on those who might be using or might be underage drinking. It's showing that most youth are not using those substances. And again, when I talked earlier about peer pressure, it's removing that cloud of peer pressure that most of their peers are not using. Go ahead.
Well, see, you're talking about community. I'm talking about face-to-face.
Right.
If you say to a young girl who's a teen, do you have an aunt that taught you how to make brownies? She says yes.
Mm-hmm.
Say, what do you think of her? She said, well, I love her because I'll always be able to remember her because she taught me how to make brownies. And then you say, how do you think she would feel if you got yourself in trouble? You see, when you take the focus off the person,
Right.
and then make them a member of the family that's
Right.
just as important as everybody else.
Absolutely.
Instead of looking down at them and telling them what they shouldn't do, you can look face to face with them and tell them what they can do, how they can help their younger brothers, how they
Absolutely.
can make the family feel better.
And that role modeling.
Positive things that individuals can say directly, but when you're talking about a whole community and you talk about statistics and everything, they can be laughed away. Look, just one incident and then I'll shut up.
Oh, no.
When the kids were made to take health insurance,
Okay.
their invincibility told them, I don't need that, so they would rather pay the penalty than pay for the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another example of how they can just ignore everything that you say.
Right, and that's the sensation seeking, that's the risk taking, that's everything in between. But yeah, it is really important for older siblings to be positive role models. So we do talk about that. One of the other things that we do talk about too as a coalition is we do talk about parental modeling as well. So it's really important for parents to display really positive substance-free behaviors for their youth too, because that's something that a lot of youth are also seeing. So that will come into play along the year as well. Does anybody have any other questions? Yes.
Well, you know, you've said a lot of, Wings of Hope have presented a lot of individual things,
Yes.
but do you have a large group thing? Like in Norway, we had a group that everybody was clamoring to join.
Right.
It was IOGT, International Organization of Good Templars, and we all wanted to join that.
Right. So you mean maybe try...
Do you have a big group?
So we do have those individual volunteer groups. We do usually hold a general meeting for the coalition. So anybody, when we hold a general meeting for the coalition, anybody is welcome. So we did hold one in February and we did hold another one in October. So more than likely when I meet with the coalition steering committee again in December, we're probably going to start formulating plans for that new general meeting coming up in 2019. But you can call me at any time if you want to get involved. You don't have to come to a meeting and say, I'm getting involved. You can call me at any time and tell me you want to get involved. You can email me at any time and tell me you want to get involved. And you can tell me what you're good at. If you're good at putting documents together, if you're good at writing, if you're good at art, if you're good at anything, I'll be more than happy to hear it and will be more than happy to find a place for you to help the coalition. Oh yeah, absolutely. But yes, we do hold general meetings.
You have a strong, large group. Why, or something like that.
We do. We have a great group. We have a great steering committee. We're very lucky that the Old Colony Y is the fiscal agent for Wings of Hope, so we have a really strong background there. The Old Colony Y is a protective piece in itself because it's a place for youth to go, to get involved, to be active. So if you want to get involved, we probably will have another general meeting in 2019, but if you want to get involved yourself or anybody, give me a call or send me an email. I will be more than happy to talk to you. And I think Judy's standing up, so I think she's calling me.
Are there other questions?
Do you have, yes,
Just make a comment. that
Sure.
Some other things that were said, and someone was asked about illegal, where people can get drugs illegally, and even 40-plus years ago.
mm-hmm,
You know, people would go to Boston Commons to buy a marijuana cigarette for $1.
mm-hmm,
And that was high school kids.
Right.
So those situations exist today,
mm-hmm,
no matter where you are, and being close to Brockton.
Right.
Anyone could get to Brockton,
mm-hmm,
on the streets of Brockton, and buy drugs that may be legal or illegal drugs.
Right.
And I think it's important to understand that, that does, exist. And with the legalization of marijuana, I know you mentioned something like that. I don't know if there are community groups involved. I know last night the town of Lakeville
right,
was trying to have a zoning law change to prevent the sale of marijuana in their community.
right,
And, that's similar to vaping or cigarettes, are not going to be available until you reach, the age of 21. Someone can't legally purchase it.
Right.
But it would be in the same way that vaping shops are on every corner. If you can go see that marijuana is being sold legally, that's, one thing that would make that as a drug that's being now available, just to, go and buy it.
right. It creates a sense of normalization.
And, the prevention thing is it is important, but, the example of getting someone before they jump in the river.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that have to be available.
Right.
Once someone does jump in and get addicted.
Oh, of course.
Get involved, and you had mentioned about the teen self-reporting on drug surveys or alcohol surveys. The teens, it's known that they're not always going to be reporting accurately
Okay.
on their self-surveys, but if the community has not looked at how they can find out about the drug and alcohol use through other sources, including the police department, the physicians, drug treatment, this Wings of Hope, and figure out maybe if those statistics of the 70-30 that you said, maybe it's really, that's not the true picture of what's happening in this town. And there are so many other ways that you could find out about that kind of thing.
Right, we do seek out many different avenues to find out what's going on in the town and statewide. As far as the surveys are concerned, we are incredibly lucky that we do have a really awesome evaluator on our team for Wings of Hope. And we have found that over the couple of years, while sometimes some youth might be dishonest on those surveys, we have found that some of those numbers have remained consistent. And there are a couple of different ways that our evaluator is able to tell whether or not a survey is valid or not valid and remove it from that sample size of children. But yeah, that is always a concern, ma'am, absolutely. Doc, and then I think we'll be good to go. Doc will be the last question.
Okay, a little bit of a summary. I have some literature from our Mass Medical Society here, and they talk about new laws in Massachusetts. New tobacco legislation will go into effect at the end of December.
Yep.
The age for sale of all nicotine products will rise from 18 to 21.
Great.
And the use of e-cigarettes will be prohibited where smoke-free workplace laws apply. They're also going to require these facilities that sell all these e-cigarettes and so forth to have permits.
Right.
And they're discouraging the flavored products, which I think you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of activity going on here.
A lot.
I think as citizens we can help to support all this.
Right. I mean, they've come to realize, the state as a whole has come to realize that this is a really big issue, and a lot of that can also be attributed to the Department of Public Health, where their tobacco prevention program has brought to the state's attention as well, that the juuling and the vaping and the flavored products are a huge problem in every single city and town in the state. So, but thank you so much, guys. Thank you for listening and your questions.
I'd like to say thank you to Larissa especially for her presentation.
Thank you.
And for all her knowledge. And I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who's here. I heard a lot of insightful questions,
Yes.
a lot of insightful comments. It's absolutely evident that this is a problem that we all need to think about, we all need to kind of get involved with at some level, you know, whether it's prevention, whether it's treatment, or whatever. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.